Okay, let me put that back up then.
Okay.
The problem is when you're sharing it, it limits how much is up there on the. Okay, here we go. Limits how much is available on the bottom to look at. But now we can go forward.
Did I see Ken Rich there?
Yes.
Oh, hey, Ken Rich. So again, I'm Daren Smith with, well, I work for a firm called Economic and Planning Systems that's here in Oakland. We have offices in other cities as well, Sacramento, Los Angeles, and Denver. And I've been working on housing policy and real estate development issues for 23 years now. Kind of all over the country with a particular focus on affordable housing and neighborhood change and neighborhood revitalization, it used to be called. Now the same thing is called displacement and gentrification. So I've been kind of on all sides of the issues and surrounding these kinds of neighborhood change issues for my entire adult life at this point. And as I was saying before, the reason I first got in touch with Stuart is because in the Rockridge News, probably about 2 years ago, I saw an advertisement that there was interest in discussing how legislative change that was in the works or being discussed at the state level might affect Rockridge, in particular the potential for intensification of development along commercial corridors, near transit, and even in otherwise single-family neighborhoods. So Stuart and I have been in touch for really a couple of years now, and I have put together some thoughts and some analysis to address some of the questions as I understand them that this organization might be concerned about. So the first slide will kind of introduce what are the questions that I've been thinking about and discussing with Stuart. And I should also say that David Garcia of this group, as well as of the Turner Center at UC Berkeley, has been in some touch on these issues as well. So the questions as I understood them, of course, potential state law, SB 50, and others may increase the minimum density in transit-served areas like Rockridge. Of course, we have the BART station. We also have bus service, and there are a number of ways that the state has been looking to intensify development of housing, in particular, around transit-served corridors and neighborhoods. In particular, the existing single-family parcels might be required to upzone to allow up to 4 units without an assembly of parcels. Commercial parcels may be required to increase their heights and densities as well, especially along transit-served corridors. So as I was addressing it, the questions really are, what might upzoning the single-family parcels mean for the character of Rockridge, and also how might development be, the value of new development be harnessed to address community objectives like affordable housing. And I address these questions through an economics lens rather than through an equity lens or an environmental lens. And by economics lens, I mean what is likely or possible given the basic financial motivation of the various participants in the development process, prospective renters or buyers, developers, and of course, existing property owners. And so it's all of those perspectives that I've tried to encapsulate in the work that I've been doing on this subject. The next slide, a very brief primer on how I think about housing economics. Housing development only happens when the revenues generated by the development exceed the costs of development by a sufficient margin. Meaning, if it costs you $1 million to build something and you can only sell it for $800,000, that's not economically feasible unless there's subsidy involved. So the revenues here, I'm thinking about the sale prices or rental income, any potential subsidies that might be provided for the project. On the cost side, thinking about the cost of acquiring the land for development in the first place, and the hard construction costs, that's the labor and materials side of things. And then the soft costs like the design and the financing and any impact fees and things of that nature go into the soft cost category. Um, Developers and investors need to foresee a financial return before they take on the project that justifies the risk relative to other investment opportunities. If you can put your money in the stock market and have it go up 11% per year, um, obviously not the last couple of days, but that's the long-term trend for a decade now, you're going to want to see a profit margin or a return on investment that exceeds something and justifies the risk that you take on with a project. And then when we think about community benefits such as affordable housing or open space or any number of other things, those community benefits can either diminish the revenues associated with the project if some of the units can only be sold for less than others, and or add costs to the development. And both of those potentials have to be factored into the feasibility equation. The next slide will take on the first question. Actually, it sets a bit of a bar. Again, when I'm thinking about the feasibility of a development, one of the things that I think about is how much does it cost to get the land to do this in the first place? And of course, Rockridge is a very built out area. There are not many vacant parcels available. Everything pretty much has something on it. And the land value here is especially high. If we're talking about redeveloping a commercial site or a residential lot, we have to account for the fact that those things have value. And I looked at the average prices of homes in the two zip codes that I associate with Rockridge, 94618, 94609. The average price of home for 2018 to 2019 is over $1 million. And we understand that home values have continued to go up since then, even with the pandemic and perhaps in some measures because of the pandemic. If you equate that on a land basis, look at the size of the lots associated with those units. It's about 5,000 square feet average in the 94618 zip code, about 4,000 in 94609. But to acquire an acre of land would cost you about $11 million, over $11 million, if you could assemble, 8 to 10 contiguous parcels with homes on them. That's what it would cost you to do that if you had motivated sellers in every case. So that kind of sets a bar of one of the inputs to a development feasibility consideration. What does it cost to get the land in the first place? And the next slide then starts to address the questions as I understood them. The first really is, what would it mean if single-family homes are allowed to be torn down and converted to, whether it's 2 to 4 units on the same lot? Is that likely to occur? And again, I'm approaching this from an economics perspective. And again, I think that even if there's a willing seller of the property, the cost of redeveloping those lots would be very high. It would cost you over $1 million to purchase a typical home lot in Rockridge. And then the cost of construction and fees and other things are also significant. And the next slide will show a table, but I don't want to go to that next slide quite yet. So back it up. Thank you. So because the cost of land are so high, it is certainly true that if you have to pay $1 million just to get the land in the first place, if you can do 4 units on that site, then you're spreading that $1 million land acquisition cost over 4 units instead of 2. So it's still $250,000 of land per unit, but that's better than $500,000 of land per unit. And what I've concluded based on my analysis is that it is unlikely that for an average home, average single-family home in the Rockridge area, that it would be economically feasible to acquire it at market value, tear it down, and put up 2 or even 4 new homes on the same lot. Now, this does not address the question of accessory dwelling units, which is a separate thing. I'm thinking now about tear downs. Accessory dwelling units have been strongly encouraged by the state and are also being encouraged by the city of Oakland. And they could be much more feasible insofar as they do not require tear down per se. It's just adding another unit within or alongside your existing home. So again, the prototype that I'm thinking about here is not ADUs. It's really tearing down existing single family homes and replacing them. So now the next slide will show some of the math that I've done on the subject. And it shows 3 different scenarios, each of which is assumed to occur on a 4,000 square foot lot. And the 3 scenarios are that you tear that down and put up a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. And there are these things in our neighborhoods. I used to live in one myself just up the street. But the idea here is that if you're acquiring the lot for this development at $1 million a piece, and then have to spend something like $450 per square foot of the new unit, and then the developer, of course, needs to make a reasonable profit on their at-risk investment, that the time period that I was taking the data, the average home price in these zip codes was selling for about $758 a square foot. And this math says that after you acquire the unit, the land in the first place, and then go through the cost of putting up the new units, that if you're just doing a duplex, you would need to sell that duplex for $916 a square foot, which is 21% above the average home price in the area. So it would require a significant premium over the existing average home price to make that project feasible. And it gets more feasible the more units you add, up to 3 and 4 units. The premium required for feasibility gets lower, but it is still a considerable premium that is required for the new units relative to the average home price in the area. So I see that as a significant deterrent to, certainly any kind of large scale redevelopment of single family homes in our neighborhood. There certainly may be some homes, and I know there's one on, I guess it's 62nd Street between Colby and Hillegas, that was in disrepair and is now being torn down. And that kind of thing does present a different opportunity when a home is really undervalued. But for an average home, it does not appear to be feasible to try to tear down an existing single family home worth over $1 million and replace it with a few more units. The next slide addresses a slightly bigger concept, where you would be assembling single family lots for larger projects. And here again, we've got typically 4,000 to 5,000 square foot lots are common in our community. And so you would need, if you're going to do a project of any real scale, you would need to assemble at least several of those lots. And if each of those costs $1 million, we're talking again about the equivalent of $11 million or so per acre. And that's assuming that each of those sellers is motivated to sell. And it is not uncommon for larger projects that have a holdout or two in a property assembly to have to significantly overpay for the land to make that happen. So here, though, we're thinking not about duplexes and 3 triplexes and fourplexes, but rather a multifamily building with something like 30 to 60 units per acre kind of density. And those types of buildings cost even more per square foot to build. They have inefficiencies. There are parts of the buildings that are not sellable or leasable. Plus the materials for them, the design for them is all more complex and more costly. And because of those conditions, again, my conclusion is that the assembly of single family homes, home lots, to prepare for multifamily will be rare. Again, there may be conditions where there happen to be a couple of lots near to one another, or a large scale lot that is already sizable enough with a low enough value use on it to make it feasible. But as a rule in our community, I do not foresee that happening with any kind of frequency. And again, the next slide shows the math that I've prepared on that, where we're looking here at projects with a 36 to 60 unit per acre concept. And again, these all can be accommodated in wood frame construction with on-site parking is assumed in these cases. And the cost per unit, if you're doing, say, 36 units per acre, 800 square foot unit, I estimate the cost per unit, including the land and the construction and the profit for the developer, to be a little over $800,000 per unit, which would require that that unit gets the equivalent of over $1,000 a square foot in sale value. And again, that's a significant premium over the average unit values that we see in the community. Again, this data is a bit dated, but still it's a 35% premium over those seen prices. And again, as the density increases from 36 units to 50 and 60 units per acre, we see that that premium comes down in most measure because you are spreading the cost of acquiring the land in the first place over more square footage and more units, which means that you can have a feasible project with lower price premiums. But still, I'm looking here at a 12% premium over existing average home prices for this to begin to be feasible. And then the final set of slides was really asking the question about what about opportunity sites that are unique, not necessarily tucked into the neighborhood streets, but perhaps along the corridors on the commercial streets. And here I looked at the values of commercial sites in our zip codes, what they were asking, what they were getting, and see that those commercial values are actually higher in most cases than the residential values, which, you know, you add that additional cost of property acquisition to the financial analysis I previously presented, and it just makes it that much harder. The next slide shows some of the land comparable transactions that I was able to find in our community. We've got about a dozen or so properties that were listed for sale or did sell in the zip codes here, and the equivalent per acre is, you know, as high or higher in most cases. Some of them were the equivalent of, you know, $40 million per acre to acquire those sites. And now mostly that is because, again, we don't have much in the way of undeveloped land. So these are existing buildings with existing tenants and cash flow that you need to acquire. And you need to generate enough value to make it worth the seller's while. One exception here, we did look at the DaVita site at 5354 Claremont next to the DMV. I believe it used to be a Safeway. And that property is not listed for sale, but I did look at the average. It's an 18,000 square foot proper building on a 1.7 acre site, so relatively low density for this community. So I would consider that to be an underutilized site. The building itself at 18,000 square feet, if that's only worth what the average office kind of Class B, Class C office building is worth in our community, that's only less than $300 a square foot. So I estimated the value of that building to be about $4.2 million, which would potentially put that site in play for redevelopment. That said, I know anecdotally that other medical office buildings in other markets, and in particular other dialysis centers in other markets, have sold for significantly more than what I'm assuming here. So that is no certainty that DaVita or whomever it is that owns that building would be willing to make that site available for housing development if that were of interest to a developer. So again, setting the baseline here that commercial properties are very expensive in our community. And if it were the case that they were a lot cheaper than buying someone's homes, that might change the story. But in fact, it just makes it that much more challenging to redevelop most of those sites. So again, another question that I was trying to address on the next slide is about affordable housing. The question was raised, well, what can we do to promote housing affordability in our community? Is there a localized inclusionary program, or is there a localized community benefits and density bonus program that Rockridge might think about promoting and getting support from the city for? And so here the comparison is really to what a developer could already do under state law. The state density bonus program has been relatively generous and got arguably more generous in terms of how many additional units you would be allowed to build if you provide a certain amount of affordable housing. It was for a long time that, for example, if you provided 11% of your units at what's called very low incomes, that you could get a maximum 35% density bonus. That is now, as of last month, increased to a 50% density bonus if you do 15% of your base units as very low income. But it's really just sort of a continuation of the arc of these benefits and incentives. I know David Garcia's group did some analysis of this and concluded that the additional density bonus, and forgive me if I'm misrepresenting, but my understanding of that work is that the conclusion was that the additional density bonus implied by the new AB 2345 does not appear to add significant value compared to the previous density bonus. So in any case, the idea that you would ask developers in a place that the numbers that I showed you so far all represented market rate housing development with no discounts for affordable housing. And if you're asking developers to produce some of their units at less than market value and typically less than the cost of constructing the unit in the first place, that just creates more of a feasibility challenge rather than a true incentive for development, unless you are having a significantly improved incentive program to get them to do that. And so there, for example, if we were to consider offering, say, an 80% density bonus instead of a maximum of 50, that might change the equation, but the numbers on the next slide, Stuart, suggest that there's a significant challenge, again, to providing affordable housing, even with the density bonus that would be implied. And again, the more units that you can get on the site with these very expensive sites, the more feasible the project may be. But I still don't see a significant opportunity for the existing state density bonus to incentivize construction of affordable housing in Rockridge, unless the community were to create a still greater incentive for affordable housing. And so I think the final slide is, again, just sort of a summary of one man's conclusions. I do have professional interest and experience with these questions, but it is possible that other perspectives may prevail. But my conclusions from this analysis are that upzoning single-family parcels to allow 2, 3, or 4 units on what was otherwise a single-family parcel is not likely to occur with any great frequency, because the costs of acquiring the sites and the cost of construction are so high. I don't see that there's a likelihood of significant number of teardowns of single-family homes or assemblies of single-family homes for larger projects, or demolition of commercial properties to create new multifamily, unless the existing properties are significantly undervalued relative to where the kind of average market is. And with respect to addressing community objectives like affordable housing, again, because of the challenge of feasibility, even for market rate development in the neighborhood, I don't see a huge opportunity to have, say, a modest incentive to create affordable housing. I think that the incentive would have to be fairly significant if you're going to ask for affordable housing as part of a development. Again, with the exception of properties that are significantly undervalued relative to market averages. And I know I've been talking a while, and perhaps some of you may have questions or want to circle back to some of the materials. So thank you for indulging my prattling, and let's talk.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting, and I appreciate all of the work that you put into this. It's taken a while for us to get here, but I think it's very much worth it. Kurt had a question he had raised in the chat, and I thought you might. Kurt, do you want to start things off by asking that?
Yeah, hi Daren. Thanks for doing this analysis. Stu, can you go back to slide 6?
Okay.
While you're doing that, Daren, just to give you context, I was an econ major undergrad, and a finance major was one of my things in business school. Mine is less in the real estate area, more in high-tech justification of projects.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for doing the top line part about the costs of construction. When I look at the revenue side, one of the things, there's not only the analysis of cost versus value, but then there's the cash flow lens. Mm-hmm. So if if I were to take out $1 million loan for real estate right now from a bank, what interest rate am I charged?
For development?
Yeah.
For prospective development, I would say, well, I would say 6.
Okay. So it cost me $60,000 a year to get a $1 million loan. When I put in, upkeep, but then take away depreciation, everything else, when I look at some of the rents that are going for studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, I can easily justify a 4-plex on a cash flow basis. That because of the low cost of capital, which is expected to continue, for another 5 years, I can justify building this on a cash flow basis because cash is so cheap these days. Mm. Am I missing something there?
I am.
That's unfair. The other data points I would add that again are part of my assumption is like when I look at, I did a quick search on rents and I saw studio apartments going for $1,500, 1-bedrooms going for $2,000, that kind of stuff. I can imagine cramming, a bunch of 1-bedrooms or 2-bedrooms in a 4-plex, and I easily saw, $8,000 per month in revenue or more. So I'll stop there, but that was another key data point.
Okay. So I did not do the cash flow analysis. I was looking more on a static basis at the cost of the cost of construction and the profit margin that we typically see from developers on a static basis. As if you're selling the unit, whether it's actually a condo unit or sold to a apartment holder manager type. That the cost of construction here is, significantly high. In the case that we're looking at here, of the 4-plex, for example, We're looking at between acquiring the site and constructing the units and a bit of profit margin there, $764,000 per unit to build those units. And so that equates, if we're talking about a 900 square foot unit, which might be an average, perhaps a slightly below average size 2-bedroom unit in our community, that you would need to sell that unit for $849 per
So more
square
on a
foot.
condo basis?
Well, so that's one equivalency. The other is you capitalize the cash flow as you're describing the rents that you could get over time. So if you're talking about, as you said, $8,000 a month of gross income from that project, and by the way, I could talk about this all night, and I don't know if everybody wants to go through it, but that's $96,000 a year. You typically have operating expenses of something like 30% of your overall rents, so that'll drop that to $65,000 a year from those 4 units, right? And so you capitalize, what did I say, $65,000 a year? Capitalize those at, say, 5% cap rate. That'll put you right in the ballpark of a $3 million value for those 4 units. So again, it's not a home run on a rental basis either. Again, I think there are certain properties that would lend themselves to this. I know that there's a property on Telegraph Avenue that's up for consideration for a tear down and replacement with 7 units, I believe. But that is an older property that does not appear to be in great state of repair. And so it represents a value proposition that a typical home in the Rockridge neighborhood does not, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I have other
We have a
questions.
couple of other questions.
Plenty of other people chance.
Yeah.
Hey, Stu, can I just in real quick? I want to make a point on the whole cost of capital issue. I think it is true that it is much cheaper to get debt financing than it has been in the past, with interest rates being low. But I'll also note that that makes up maybe 2/3 of your overall cost to finance. The rest is going to be made up by your investor, who's going to want a really much higher return than the bank interest rate. So on one hand, you do have cheaper bank debt, but on the other hand, you have investors who are, especially in the climate we have right now, they're going to want to see a really high return. Otherwise, as Daren mentioned, they'll just put it in the stock market.
Okay, Ken, you had a question?
Yeah. Oh, I'm not muted, hopefully. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ken.
Great. Daren, it's great to see you again.
Nice to see you.
And it's funny, you said you've been doing this for 23 years. I think I have too. So we must have started around the same time. I mean, I pretty much agree with, and these conclusions I've seen, bear out in other places. I just had sort of the 2 halves of your analysis, a couple questions on the propensity for small lots to develop. I think we've seen that that's not likely to happen. I agree with your conclusions. Even if the state decrees that every parcel can have 4 units on it, you're not going to see that happen very much. But it does seem like the ability to giving people the ability to do accessory dwelling units, or if your house allows for it, just convert your single family house into 2 units, one on the second story and one on the first story, which we can all see walking around our neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. That is, I'm guessing, more likely to happen based on your analysis than a tear down, right? And given that it seems like that could be nice for the neighborhood and nice for some people to do, I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, that was the asterisk on slide 5. That the accessory dwelling units does appear to be more financially attractive to property owners. Again, I'm trying to keep multiple perspectives in mind here. One is what a developer would do and what a buyer or tenant would do, but also what would I do with my house if I were faced with these opportunities? And the ADU prospect, whether it's a new outside unit that's converting a garage or constructing new in your back or side yard, or converting a part of your internal space to a second unit, that has a very different financial profile and is much more attractive. It's, you know, you could get similar value and typically less cost both for construction, and of course you don't need to acquire the property, you've already got it. So that's a very different proposition, and I do think I'll steer clear of the kind of value judgment about whether that's good for the community or not. I have an opinion on that, but that's not why I'm here to talk about what's good for the community. But I agree that it is certainly much more likely to occur, and more property owners like me would be motivated to consider that.
So
Jennifer asked the same question, by the way, whether that would be a more feasible. And I've thought about it myself, and there was one of the options we talked about including in the various options for scenarios, as it were, for Rockridge housing study, was the idea of allowing conversion of single family homes to fourplexes without any tear down, or up to fourplexes without a tear down.
Yeah, so I worked on a study for MTC recently that is still ongoing, but looking at the prospects of ADU construction in Oakland in particular, and what the financial prospects were, and also what kind of financial incentives there may need to be in various parts of the city, because the markets are different in East Oakland and West Oakland and downtown and North Oakland. And it seems like virtually everywhere that is likely to be feasible, given the rents that folks can achieve, even in the lower value parts of the city. That from a cost of construction perspective, that does appear to be a likely feasible type of project for households to take on. The issue tends to be financing, and not every household has a couple $100,000 available to put into converting part of their property into an accessory dwelling unit. And there are emerging but not yet fully accepted financing mechanisms, mortgages and the like, for making those happen. So it's an evolving market, and I think it's getting to a place where more and more households will have access to that kind of financing to make that happen, but it's not quite mature yet.
Okay. Kirk, you had a question about homegrown development? Kirk, you have to unmute yourself, please. There you go.
Yeah, you know, so I just designed a project for the Levant site that isn't going to get built, as far as I can tell. And I'm building a house in my backyard with an ADU on College Avenue. It just seems like it'd be interesting to see more analysis of, you know, I have a whole bunch of equity because I bought this property 30 years ago. So my thing, I hope, pencils out. But so I'm curious, especially on College Avenue, you know, what is the potential for growth for people who have tons of equity? You know, retail is, you know, I can't even rent my space for retail, it's offices. Can this be extended or extrapolated to figure out that? Because there's a lot of room, you know, when this survey started, I was interested in figuring out what is the potential new density without changing the zoning ordinance. But we didn't look at that in the end. So I'm kind of rambling here. Also, the city has been my enemy consistently. You know, and rich developers, you know, they have lawyers and all that. So anyway, I'm just interested in this homegrown, you know, there's thousands of people who have tons of equity, who may not have the stomach for building something like I do, but how, you know, it'd be interesting to look at that and figure out how can that be encouraged.
Right. Right. Well, again, we're sort of getting into the ADU model in particular, and I know there are again it's an evolving market, and there are companies that have kind of taken on the work for you of designing and building a unit. There are prefab units that people can plop down in their yards. But even more importantly than that, I think for the folks who may not have the kind of financial stomach for it, there are some companies that are willing to do that construction and also manage the unit with you for a while and share the revenues from it, mostly out of their pocket, but they're basically paying a ground lease to you for the rights to use your property for a unit that they can provide and then get a portion of the revenue from. So again, it's an evolving and emerging market for different business models that can help households that may not have the wherewithal or the risk tolerance that you may have, Kirk. But it's definitely something that we see evolving in a productive way.
And David, you had a question you wanted to ask. You want to unmute yourself? Nope, I don't hear you. You're unmuted, but somehow it's not coming through.
Sorry. So I'm actually linked to my phone, so I forget I have to do both. So I just wanted to thank Daren for taking the time to do this analysis. It is really helpful to see this all kind of laid out in front of us. I will say a lot of your findings are really consistent with some other studies I've seen in other places like Portland, which is trying to figure out where they will actually see fourplexes built in that city. And so it appears that in most places there's a sweet spot where land is not so expensive to where you will see few fourplex projects, but rents are high enough or sales prices are high enough that justifies the cost. So this seems pretty consistent with that. So it's good to see that. Actually, this is less of a technical question, more of just drawing on your expertise. Is with the impact of commercial and retail spaces from COVID and potentially the passage of Prop 15, do you see any softening of commercial prices? I mean, Rockridge is obviously a desirable place for commercial property, but given what might happen in the election and the ongoing economic crisis, if you have seen any softening of commercial prices, or if you think that might change the math at all in the future.
I think both of those conditions will have some effect, especially Prop 15. I think that the COVID situation, it's been a few months, and certainly we see rents going down for multifamily housing in San Francisco in a fairly precipitous way, as I understand it. Single-family home prices have stabilized and even increased in many markets. So there does seem to be sort of a qualitative shift in, at least temporarily, in housing preferences. You're talking about commercial. I don't have enough data on recent transactions right now to see that. They don't turn over with the frequency of apartment buildings. So I haven't seen that yet, but I would not be at all surprised. I know that I'm paying rent on an office that I haven't been to at all, because we moved in June. And why folks would do that when they're finding that perhaps far more than they expected, that they are capable of working with a remote workforce and that sort of thing. I do expect that there will be softening in the commercial market for office space. And then again, the Prop 15 will have an impact on cash flow for commercial buildings to the extent that that property's assessment goes up considerably. And I would expect that would be significant softening of the overall value, assuming that cap rates kind of stay the same. It just has to. That's math. So yeah, I think there will be some reduction in commercial values.
Okay, we're going to have to call it quits because we
Thanks,
still have some other things coming up. But there are a couple other people who already wanted to ask a question. So let me get those through, and then we'll have to call it, as I say, call it quits for the night. But there will be more. I think we're talking about trying to set up a town hall to present Daren's results and some additional work that's being done on it. That probably will happen maybe in January or February. But let's see, let me get a couple of the questions here that hadn't gotten answered yet. Ken, you had another question?
Yeah, I'll be quick. So Daren, on the other end of the spectrum, you're talking about larger parcels and the ability to get affordable housing. And, you know, Rockridge really has very few larger development sites. And, you know, they are like, there's CCA, there's the 51st and Broadway site, there's the dialysis center site, maybe that parking lot next to the rug store. And we really do want to see a lot of affordable housing, or a decent amount, come if those are developed. I mean, do you think those are big enough in scale that there could be some sort of additional density bonus that, you know, the neighborhood could advocate for that would actually make, you know, reasonable amount of affordable housing work on those sites? Because that would certainly be desirable if we could make the economics work.
Yeah, well, I think there's two different ways that could go. One is more density in exchange for a mixed income project with affordable units. But then, of course, there are affordable housing builders who are able to make it work in lots of markets. They require tons of subsidy. Their units are usually gorgeous and cost even more somehow than market rate development costs.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And you know, that's always an option. It tends to take a long time just because of funding cycles and that sort of thing. But having a Saha or a Bridge or an Eden or a Mid-Penn or one of those very, you know, we are blessed in the Bay Area to have tremendously successful and experienced affordable housing builders with a lot of projects under their belt and a lot of funding behind them. That might be more likely, based on the math that I've done, than providing a huge incentive, density bonus incentive, or other similar incentive to a market rate developer to provide some smaller number of affordable units in their project.
Thanks. I would just say, you know, we would be really lucky, and I hope we can sort of attract that on one of those sites. I think given the city's scarcity of subsidy, and, you know, it's about 300,000 a unit in subsidy to make one of those work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not going to get that on more than one site, but it would be great to try to advocate for one of them.
Yeah, as you probably know, they did look at affordability in terms of the CCA site, and it didn't pencil out. They're now talking about it, instead of doing that, just putting in essentially paying the in lieu fees instead for that. And as you may also know, the Broadway Pleasant Valley site, the property owner has been steadfastly refusing to look at anything residential, even though the developer has been pushing real hard to get them to do that. But the developer, the owner, has basically said, no way. So at the moment, it looks like the only site that might have some possibilities there would be the DeVita site. And that depends on them being able to find someplace else to move to, because it's a very profitable operation. If they can't find someplace else to go, they're going to stay there. And that, actually, I just wanted to point out that with any of these things, you've always got a competition between doing something different and doing more of the same. So even if you've got a house that's a single family house that's in poor repair and substandard, there's the potential of either building something different there or just building a new single family home there. And with the costs now, I tend to think the single family would tend to win out. Daren, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the market is very strong for single family homes, and you know, especially in the COVID experience, having larger space, having outdoor space has come at a premium. And you know, that's hopefully a temporary thing, but I think folks who may have been motivated for urban lifestyles are seeing the value of a semi-urban lifestyle like we have on most of the streets of Rockridge.
Brian, you had a question or comment? Brian, you have to unmute.
No, I don't want to take up the group with this. I think we thoroughly covered it. The only thing that I would say, just to Kurt, is around just even if you have a ton of equity in your home, you still got to go out and tap the debt markets to figure out. Most likely, it's going to be a HELOC or a loan. And to Daren's point, and from personal experience here, there's just not a lot of consensus in the debt markets right now in terms of how to underwrite things, especially from the two metrics that really matter, both your debt to income and then also your loan to value. Just there's not really much of in the way of ADUs that are out there to comp against, and that makes it pretty difficult. And some lenders aren't actually even willing to underwrite potential income from an ADU. So those are really the challenges around ADU financing when the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, Jennifer had asked the question about affordable housing. I don't know that that's something that Daren, you know too much about, but I believe she was asking specifically about the Home Key program and Bay Area Community Services. And I believe they did get some funding. I'm not sure how much of it came from Home Key and how much of it came from the city, but I know that they did get some money to do some converting of single family homes to supportive housing. So that, I believe that is moving forward, but I don't know exactly how the funding is coming for that. I don't know, Daren, do you have any knowledge of that? Probably not. No, okay. But I think we probably are going to have to move on. Thank you very much, Daren, and you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the. I
got to put some kids to bed, but thank you for your time this evening, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Daren.
Okay, next item is the question about a recommendation to the Board of Directors on moving ahead with the traffic consultant work for analysis of the CCA project. As I mentioned at the start of this meeting, the board did agree to put up some money to hire a transportation engineer to look at the traffic issues around the CCA site and essentially critique what comes out in the ER. We don't know what the ER will say. It's obviously going to be somewhat different than what it would have said with the 19-story building because the project has gotten smaller. But the basic issues are going to still be the same. We have one access point into the site, and there's going to be a fairly significant number of people moving in and out of there. How is that going to affect the traffic? And so the issue was whether it's time to basically tell the traffic analyst to get started on familiarizing himself with the area to the point where when the EIR comes out, he can jump in there and look at what the analysis they did and see whether it makes sense. And I wondered whether people had thoughts on that.
Stu, this is Laura.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of this. I know that some of the people in UBA are, because I think Nicole wrote to the group about it. But at the end of the Planning Commission meeting, a couple of the commissioners were talking, and they were all still up at their mics, about wanting definitely to look at the 19-story tower still as a potential alternative. So I think that should be included as a possibility for a traffic analysis.
Well, we're
yeah, a clarification on that.
Yeah, we're going to have to wait until the EIR comes out to see what alternatives it does look at. The point where we're doing it here is simply to bring the consultant we've hired up to speed so that whatever the EIR says, he's in a position to look at the analysis and see whether it makes sense. They may be doing a 19-story alternative, a higher density alternative. They may be doing a variety of different things. But the analysis that's going to have to be done is going to have to be based on what's there now and what the conditions are now. And so that's what we're talking about is telling the consultant, go ahead and get started and preparing yourself. So the question is whether that's worth doing now. Jennifer?
Yes, Stuart, wouldn't this consultant also have to take a look at, not with the site and the traffic now, but how it is in a normal scenario when kids are going to the school and there's more people driving, going to work? I think it's important that study take a look at that.
Yeah, it clearly you're not going to get any traffic study done now with the abnormal situation we're in now with COVID, and for that matter, with the somewhat of an economic downturn accompanying that. So all of the analysis all of the information that he'd be looking at would be past information from prior studies that have been done, for example, on the Broadway Safeway. And I believe there was a certain amount of traffic analysis done for the, trying to remember what the name of the building on Broadway, something on Broadway, the Baxter, yeah. I believe there was some traffic analysis done for the Baxter on Broadway. So it would be looking at those numbers, and those all based on past more normal times. I don't think anybody's going to be trying to look at what's there now in terms of figuring out how things would work under a normal situation.
Stu?
Yeah.
This is Leslie. After having made an extensive traffic study for our own little few blocks here, I think it's very important for the traffic study consultant not just to look at numbers and figures and data, but to actually on the ground walk around and meet with the local people, especially those who drive and walk and have children and all kinds of other variables. Very important that he not just stick to written data.
He's going to be, he's not from the local area. So that would be a bit of a push to have him come in here, but we could certainly maybe arrange for him to do some interviews, maybe on Zoom or by phone, with some people around here to get a sense of what people's assessment of that's not a bad idea.
We've had such problems up at Gilbert and Pleasant Valley with the road diet, with the bollards, etc., on traffic, on the Telegraph, and with the little traffic roundabout. It's clear that local residents are never consulted enough to have better outcomes.
Right, but you need to understand, we're not talking here about Oakdot. This is going to be outside consultants. They will have nothing to do with Oakdot. So
yeah,
don't gauge how things work with Oakdot against what's going to happen with this traffic analysis for this project.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying.
You? I think that it's good for them to get to start knowing the area, because we have dealt with this before with the Safeway, except that intersection on Clifton and Broadway is going to be really difficult with all those lights.
Yeah,
so close. So
I think
that's
going to be the big challenge, and as much as he can get that under his belt beforehand in terms of seeing what's there now and how is it working and what's been done so far. We'd also, and of course, there's stuff that was proposed to happen with phase 2 of the Broadway Pleasant Valley project, and that phase 2 never happened. So there is a lot of stuff that's waiting in the rings, but never may come out on stage.
The realignment of College and Broadway, I guess.
Right. Any other thoughts, Jennifer?
Just one more thing on the official plan that was submitted to the city for the CCA site. I think it's like 447 units, but in the presentation that was given along with that by Rebecca Lind, saying with what they're asking for with this complete overlay and the whole bit, it could be like, it was 700 and something units. So it could actually, and that's without any density bonus if they were to get that for anything that they're doing. So this project could be much, much bigger than if this traffic consultant just looks at 447 units.
Yeah, we're going to have to, obviously, we'll have to wait until the EIR comes out until we can tell what the scope of the options are that are being looked at. And that's going to have to be the basis for the analysis he does, or the analysis he critiques. So how do people feel? Is there a sense then that we should be moving forward with recommending that the traffic consultant get started on looking at things?
Yeah, I agree. I say it's time for them to start getting prepared.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should tell him to go ahead and start the preliminaries.
Kirk, did you have any comments?
Well, I think we should start. Do we need a motion?
I think we've got, I think, oh, and Laura, did you have any other thoughts? And Laura, you're muted. Uh-oh.
No.
Okay. So I think we polled all of the members of the committee, and sounds like it's unanimous that we go ahead, that we recommend that the board authorize him to go ahead. The third item is the proposal for pedestrian bicyclist safety mitigations on College Avenue, or rather related to the College Avenue Safety Project. And we got back some numbers from Oakdot, from one of the people there, and they're high. It looks like we're not going to be able, we're going to have to go on the low side in terms of what's possible, because those rapid flashing rectangle, no, rapidly RRFP, rapid rectangular flashing, I don't remember what the fourth one, but at any rate, there are these pedestrian crossing lights, not the ones like at which have a full, with a push button with that you know, the light actually turns red. These are just rapidly flashing lights on the either on the two sides or above the street that kind of warn the motorists to watch out. There's somebody going to be crossing. And those, but the estimate was those were something like 150,000, which was much more than we thought they would be. Now, Ronnie was saying,
that total each installment?
Excuse me?
Was that total or for each installment?
That's for each intersection.
Got it.
So that would, for two of them, that would basically eat up almost the entire money. And Ronnie wasn't sure whether that included the money to actually supervise and have the city make the thing happen. In which case, we probably would be looking at a lower cost because we'd be paying for the management of the project rather than having the city do that. And I haven't heard any clarification on that. Yeah.
Audrey did not get back to us
Right.
after we asked that. Mohammed Alou, when I first spoke with him like over a year ago at a Fourth War Coalition meeting, he had said that he thought that was the only way we could get much out of it, was for us to hire somebody. So,
right. So we'll have to try and get clarification, but it does say we may have to cut down how much we ask for in terms of what we are going to be able to afford out of that 400,000. It doesn't look like it's going to go as far as we had hoped.
Stu?
Yes.
Can we get a quick clarification on the timeline? I think for a while we thought we had to allocate the money by the end of this year, but I think you had mentioned
it's end of 2021 is when we have to have submitted the application. I went back and looked at the various documents we have, and that's what the agreement says. Final date is it has to be in by 2021, and I think it has to be completed or substantial progress within 18 months of that.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
So it's still realistic. We can still do it.
Can you take down the report so I want to see everybody better?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah. My apologies. Let me go back here. So that's where we are with that. We'll have to see if we can get some clarification, but it may be we have to pare back things, but I'm hoping maybe we don't. The last item is some that some of you may have heard about, others may not have, and that has to do with the Lant building. As you know, they've had the rug store continuing to operate there, but the owners of the building have been in negotiations and apparently have signed a lease with the Red Cross which would have the Red Cross move into that building and use it as their donor center, their blood donor center, which is now located on Claremont. And I have tried to let them know that they would need a use permit to do that. And that's not necessarily going to be easy to get because it's zone CN1. In the CN1 zone, there are special findings that have to be made in order to get a use permit. And those findings, I think, would be kind of hard to make for a blood donor center. Anyways, the question that we have is whether we want to make any recommendation to the board as to whether RCPC should get involved here or not. In a lot of cases, we have stood aside and let whatever was going to happen. In other cases, we decided that no, this site is important enough for College Avenue retail that we should take a position on this. And in terms of whether we're going to, for example, push to have them get a use permit or let them take their chances. Ken?
Yeah, I would just observe that anything on College that attracts a decent amount of users is going to be good for the merchants, and that seems like a really important consideration at this point, just to attract more people.
It's a mixed bag. I can tell you from past experience, because a lot of things that have come in have made that argument. So, for example, a lot of the exercise studios have come in and say, we're going to bring in lots of people. They'll all come and exercise, and then they'll go out and shop. Well, they don't. They come in and exercise, and then they go home and shower. And so they haven't ended up adding a lot to the business. And for blood donors, who knows? They may say, well, as long as I'm here, I'll do some shopping. Or they may say, well, I've just given blood. I think I'll go home and rest some.
It's hard to know, but it just seems like a consideration.
Yeah.
What does RDA think?
I haven't gotten any formal response from RDA, but I know that Chris was not happy about it at all. And I have to say, I'm concerned that area, that was really the one retail site right there, and we lose that as retail, and that the question is whether we'll still have anything at all retail going on in that part of College.
Well, can I suggest that we make some kind of formal request to the owner, who I know, and to the board, ask them for information, because, we can let them think, well, maybe we'll think it's fine, but since we don't know anything and they're not telling us anything.
That's true. We could certainly make a recommendation that we ask the Red Cross to come in and present to the board. Yeah,
and I would also say that, I said earlier, I have retail space. I cannot rent it for retail.
Exactly.
It's hard these days to rent things for anything. But the issue about that site is it's right now, I think everyone would love to see anything rather than have something vacant. But the question is, if you rented and they rented for, let's say, a 10-year or 15-year lease, you're not just renting it for a year or two, you're renting it for 15 years.
I mean, it's hard to see what at this stage with retail, even post-COVID, what would go into a space that big. I mean, the furniture store next to Cole Hardware just went out, and that's not even that big. I just can't imagine how you're going to get a retail tenant in a space that big in this day and age. It's going to be very difficult.
Well, also, I mean, the owners plan their intent that I was working on is to do a density bonus project and then have their own fancy penthouses on the top. But earlier this year, I guess it was last year, they were talking whether they're going to try and lease it or not. Basically, they said, we're not building anything until the end of the next recession, which is, it's going to be serious. So they don't want to build anything.
Yeah.
Until the climate is very different than now. And when construction costs drop a lot.
I mean, if they're willing to share, maybe we can find out how long a lease they're considering.
I think that's a key thing are they talking 2 years or 5 years or 15 years? If they're talking 2 years or 5 years, it may be fine. If they're talking 15 years, maybe not so much. Yeah. So does it sound like what we would like to recommend is that the board invite Red Cross to come in and present what their plans are? or maybe we should ask the owner. But I think the Red Cross probably has a better idea of what they want than what the owner would have.
Yeah, and they can describe their operation better than.
I guess we could ask both of them to come in.
Yeah, we can ask. Chris will probably just blow you off again, but.
I think that's a good idea, Stu. I mean, there's always the question of, you know, always this precedent that we start having this kind of thing. This could be the beginning of this kind of change on college, and whether it's, you know, the way college has to go or not should be considered because of the, so I think it's good to talk to them and have more, get more information.
Other committee members, any thoughts on this? Laura?
Maybe you should have a cookie sales operation in the front of their building.
Right.
Well, I would say that, you know, you might want to talk to them about what they're going to make the front of it look like, regardless of whether it's a blood center or not. You don't want them, you know, you want it to look active. You don't want a blank wall in front. You want it to provide activity. There's things that can be done that would make it a better blood center or a worse blood center, and that's probably worth talking to them about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times what the city has done with things like these exercise, they've asked them to put some merchandise up near the front. And certainly Red Cross could have things like T-shirts and other sorts of Red Cross branded things that they would that they could sell there or give to people, you know, so forth.
Vials of blood.
Yeah, hopefully no blood, please.
Yes, you can buy your blood by the pint. Fresh out.
Only during Halloween.
One of the conditions that was put on Caldecott Properties was that they would have an art gallery with changing whatever, and I would not consider that. Yeah, nor. So that, I'm just saying that these conditions are generally ignored.
Yeah. I mean, they certainly don't take them very seriously. I mean, the exercise studios that I've seen that have some merchandise out in front don't do much merchandising. If you want to buy something there, you got to go and, hey, come over here, I want to buy one. There's nobody tending the store. Although I do think the Namaste used to sell quite a bit of merchandise there. So that one actually worked, but most of them don't. Yeah. So does it sound like the consensus is that we would like to recommend that the board invite Red Cross to come in and present? Does anyone have any objections to that? Okay, I think that's the last thing we have on the agenda. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you all.
One question.
Newbies and renewal.
Daren, which was a lot at the DeVita Center. Is that big enough that you can actually have affordable housing and the DeVita Center on the same site?
You could potentially have it on the ground floor.
Yeah.
You know, have the DeVita Center on the ground floor and then have residential.
I mean, it would have to go somewhere for 2 years.
That's the problem. You'd have a whole construction period.
It has to go somewhere during construction, but yeah, you could have it on the ground floor.
DeVita Center and the Lovat built for 2 years.
Combined blood and
Dialysis and blood, yes. Well, it all fits together, right?
The last I heard, that owner wasn't selling at the DeVita site.
No, they weren't interested. I think the problem is going to be where they go if they weren't there.
Dialysis pay a lot in rent. That's why the value was so high. Is that it's not a regular commercial retail space. It is a medical service, and they get a lot of their money from patients on Medicare, and so they make a lot of money.
Yeah.
You may be able to convince them to say do a lot split. I mean, DeVita is way overparked. If the owner wanted to do a lot split, I could imagine the lot is large enough to accommodate a mid-size project,
I mean,
but I don't know how.
Another way to look at that is if you could somehow get it to come back, the amount of revenue coming from the dialysis center would help make the housing more affordable. So that would be, you know, another thing to think, you know, if a developer had the wherewithal to go find them another space for 2 years and say, you come back and you pay me quite a bit of rent and I can do a little bit more affordable housing here because of that.
Well, the other thing that could be done if you did it in phases, you could move the dialysis center into, you know, basically build on half of the lot and
Yeah,
have
maybe.
them staying there, and then move the dialysis center into the other half of the lot. and build
That
on
might
the
work.
half.
I didn't think that DaVita owned that land.
Don't. They don't.
They don't, they rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when Frog was getting put in, we looked at that site, and the owner was not interested in anyway.
It may be, you know, maybe something somewhat similar to what's happened with the Broadway Pleasant Valley site. That you have an owner who has some idea in their mind, and they're not interested in going in any other direction than where they're headed.
It's usually just a matter of time till that idea goes away when it turns out not to be possible,
Well,
whatever it was.
It sure hasn't gone away for the
Here's
Broadway and
Pleasant Valley.
Pleasant Valley site.
Yeah, one, since it's voting, one thing to consider is that if Prop 23 passes, it probably put a lot of DaVita clinics
Oh, yeah, that
and
We'll see. We'll see. But I hear that's supposed to be going down to defeat. That's what, that's what the polling said.
The policy sign up kind of crazy.
Anyways, thank you all. And
Wait.
Oh, what? Yeah.
Question. You know, UBA is working on this little survey, and it's still kind of hasn't quite got its legs yet. But we would like to ask RCPC to help. This could include minor field work by board members or anybody. So should we?
Well, if you want to present something, I'd say if it's land use, you could present it first to the land use committee and then to the board. If it's not land use, just present it directly to the board and see what the board feels. I have no idea as to what the board's position would be on cooperating with UBA on some sort of a survey or something like that.
Yeah.
But you know, I think the board's open to looking at things, but whether they'll say yes to them is another matter. One other thing I should mention, as some of you may have heard already, Yahoo Groups is going away. There will be no more Yahoo Groups as of December. We have had a Yahoo Group for the Land Use Committee. Some of you are using it. Some of you who are on the committee haven't been using it. I'm thinking we might want to transition over to maybe a Google group, which maybe people might find more hospitable. I know there were people have had various off and on problems with the Yahoo group, partly because I don't think Yahoo is putting much effort or time into maintaining it or making it work well. Google seems to be more interested in doing that, or they may be. I know like the NCPC moved over something called IO.
Groups IO. That's my street did that also, and so did Oakland Tech.
So that's another option. Would be that other Groups IO, and I don't know much of anything about that. I can check with the NCPC and see how they like it. But it seems like it would be nice to have some sort of a place where people can informally shoot the breeze, as it were, electronically. We have it with the Yahoo group. We've had it set up so that you could be a full member or a sort of a partial member. We were also had file sharing and file storage. That all has already gone away. But that's also a possibility to have files available that people in the land use committee would like to be able to use on a regular basis. So, for example, city zoning files and things like that that we could have on the site. So let's think about that. I don't, like I say, they are not shutting down until December, and I don't know that there's any tremendous rush to jump into something else. But maybe we can talk a little bit more about that in the next board meeting, next land use committee meeting.
Yeah, because I actually tried to migrate some stuff over to Groups IO when they got rid of the files, and what happened was that Groups IO was overwhelmed, and because they were going to move it for you. So we want to decide this soon if we go to it, so that they can do the transition for us.
Yeah,
and we don't get too close to that deadline.
I think I may have already, I know I did this with some of the stuff. Well, we already transitioned everything for the board Yahoo group over to Dropbox. I think I also did that for the land use committee with all of the files that were on the land use committee Yahoo group. So they're all no longer. In fact, we had to do that because the file storage is all gone already.
Right. But
Yeah.
if you go to groups.io, you won't lose any of the past chat stuff. It'll still be there because they'll move the whole thing over, which could be useful.
That could be useful. Yeah, which I don't think Google Groups will do. No. Okay. All right. Unless anyone has anything else, we'll call the meeting closed. Thank you all.
Bye. Thanks.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.